Now, many of you may not know my story, but I got into this by accident. I had no interest in working in health at all, actually. It was my one subject I didn't like. And I fell into it when I got an infection in my brain and ended up disabled for 12 years. Now, going to all the experts in all the world only left me worse off. More bedridden, more close to death. It wasn't until we stopped going and we got curious, and we opened books, and we tried experiments, that we got better. And that was 5 years of attempts, and it was fun. It's so much more fun than going to the doctor's office. But I think whenever we feel certain about something, anything, and we should be each other's friends to help each other with this, whenever we're certain about something, see where we can break that certainty. Because the more curious we are, the more magical this world becomes, and the more possibility there is.
Hi, and welcome to this episode, one of the special series in the Red Pill Sangha podcast, where we've got some of the speakers' talks from our last carnivore retreat in Spain in November 2025. It's early days as I'm recording this, so we haven't even really publicized the next one, but the next year's conference will be from the 23rd till the 29th of November, and it's going to sell out fast. So go to carnivorespain.com, and depending on when you hear this or see it, you'll see last year's event until we put up the new one, but that will give you an idea. But if you want to sneak in, already selling rooms, they're going to sell out fast, and you can contact me, info@carnivorespain.com. Have a look at the amazing place. Beautiful, beautiful location. I'm going to put together some amazing speakers. There'll be some of the ones from last year and some new surprises. So if you want to be sure of a room, jump in. And if you pay a deposit, then I can book you in. And I hope to see some of you next November. But enjoy this talk from the Carnival Conference 2025. Nobody can hold a candle to the Sherlock Holmes of health, and I'm honoured to say my very dear friend, MaryRuddick. Yeah!
That was a great intro. You made me giggle. Thank you. So welcome. It is so lovely to have you all in community tonight. I appreciate you all waiting until the evening. I thought the slides might turn up a little bit better. Now, we're going to get started talking about some carnivore tribes and communities around the world, and hopefully I can help discern and help you all understand why some people can eat some foods and some people cannot on the carnivore diet, and also why it is indeed complex, as Dr. Abe discussed this morning. So this is what we're going to get into. We're going to get into a little microbes, a little mischief, a little carnivore tribes, and some mTOR. So first, who am I? Aside from Phil's wonderful introduction, I'm a human ecologist. That means we study everything that interacts, so the entire environment, inside and out. It's becoming more and more relevant these days. I have a great deal of experience working with over 42 different diets and medical diets with clients over 10 plus years, seeing what works in each person and why it does need to be individualized these days, very often. So if you're curious about human ecology, since most people have never heard of it before, there's more info for you. But my specialty is really in the microbiome, right? We all hear about the microbiome. We often think we know about the microbiome, even myself, and we are constantly being humbled and learning more. When I tell people I work with the microbiome, they often think it's the gut microbiome, right? And this is a huge mistake. because it is so much more. Did you know that we have unique microbiomes in the lungs, in every single organ, on the skin, in the eyes, on your fingernails versus your toenails, and in your nervous system and the brain? And if a microbe that may be very, very good for you in one area, like Nissl 1917 in the colon, very, very good E. coli microbe for us, if that gets into the vaginal canal, uh-oh, right? Now, what I love about this is the constant discovery. We've recently discovered, not too long ago, a whole new class called obelisks. We don't know what they are. But for so long, the womb was discussed as sterile. And every time we keep doing that, we keep finding out that we just haven't been able to see what's there. Here's a study for you, if you all are interested. There's many more. But this can deeply affect the ability to conceive. Now, the vaginal, even go lower, vaginal microbiome can deeply affect one's ability to conceive. A lot of people will have something called BV. A lot of women know about this. It's really an overgrowth. The microbe belongs in the vaginal canal. But when overgrown, it changes the pH, and that neutralizes the sperm. This is rarely ruled out in infertility clinics, and it is such a quick fix. You see a little L. crispatus to crowd that guy out. But before I bore you with microbes and birth, I'd like to judge some pandas. Would you all like to judge some pandas? Yeah? Excellent. I often find, I don't know about you all, that the most uncomfortable truths are easier to hear in parable, in story, in myth, in archetype. We can take them less personally. We can see things in ourselves if we look at them in others. So let's dive in. How many vets does it take to create a panda cub? Anyone? It's about 1,000. I pulled that number out of my hat. But they are almost impossible to get pregnant. They don't even remember how to do it. That's why they have panda cinema. And I'm not joking. The vets have made panda cinema to remind the pandas how to enjoy each other. It's super real. They feed them Centrum Silver, and they're fed all this bamboo. And isn't that what we have always been told since we were little, going to zoos? Panda bears are so different than other bears. They eat bamboo. There we are. But what if they are fertile? Wouldn't that be interesting? Like in nature? That would be funny. See, pandas have single-chambered stomachs, unlike ruminants, with 4 chamber stomachs. You can see I've put up this diagram here of all the different kinds of bears and the gastrointestinal systems. And pandas lack the microbiota to break down cellulose, which is bamboo. So do you guys remember how much bamboo they were fed every single day? Anyone? Excellent. But their microbiota can't break it down. Now, in panda stool studies, we find something very interesting. We find ethanol. Does anyone know what ethanol is? That's right. So what if all the pandas we've ever known are simply drunk? Right? They're rolling out of trees. They look exactly like a college campus at 2:30 a.m. They do, though, right? And what if they're actually really fierce when they're fed the appropriate species diet? Of course, we can't say. I've been asking and asking, and no one has stolen me 2 pandas. Easiest ones are at Mexico City. I say it every time. Mexico City Zoo. I would love a pair of pandas. Love to do this experiment. But if any of you were to steal 2 pandas for me, we could not expect a panda from the zoo-fed, generationally microbiome collapsed, Centrum silver, and bamboo diet, that it will be as fierce as what its potential might be. Perhaps it's lost a great deal of its ancestral microbes, right? The ones that it always should have had before it got stuck in that valley, and then we silly humans assume that they only eat bamboo.
I'd like to take a moment to talk about my autoimmunity consults, especially for rheumatoid or psoriatic arthritis. If you or anyone you know is suffering from arthritis, I can help. I can give you the knowledge and confidence that took me years and most of my savings to uncover. I've worked successfully with hundreds of clients, and I'm in the unique position that I've been through it myself and come out the other side healed. So I know firsthand what does and doesn't work. If you book a consult or 3-consult deal, you will also get email support, plus my 30-video online course, Autoimmunity, the Subtraction Method, and my Kindle bestseller, Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, for free. For more details, how to book, and to read testimonials, go to philescott.com.
Humans have a condition. You all may be familiar with autobrewery syndrome. I work with it a lot. We can get drunk without ever having alcohol very easily. In fact, a lot of people with chronic fatigue syndrome, a lot of people with ATP energy issues can very often have autobrewery syndrome. You get pulled over for a DUI. It's expensive. So, now that we've talked a little bit about pandas, just keep that in mind. Let's go to the tribes. And later, I promise, we can go to the bickering over eggs and dairy and fish. I did promise you footage. So with the carnivore tribes, there are really different variants across the globe. We have the marine carnivores, so I think the Inuits. We have the ruminant pastoral. We have the inland big game. And we have the arid land carnivores, all very different diets. We're going to discuss how our modern birth microbiome doesn't always suit for the traditional carnivore diet in each person. It does for case by case. So let's start with the marine carnivores, because I feel like they're not spoken about as much. You're going to see a couple of these tribes in multiple slides, because some of them, like the Sami, there are 4 different variations within the Sami. So they live in different places, and they actually have different diets. There's ones on the river, the ocean, there's the reindeer herders. Inuit as well. I mean, they expand thousands of miles. So it does range based on the location. For instance, on my trips to Greenland, I can be 20 miles away on dog sled and have a completely different diet with that village. We might be eating polar bear soup because there are so many polar bears there. And 20 miles away, which really isn't very far, it's mostly the seasonal seafood, right? So the guys, we're gonna have seal, then it goes walrus, narwhal, and the rest. Of course, the fermented auk. So this is one of my dog sled travels. It's incredibly peaceful, as you can see. It always seems like it's going to be this big adventure, right, if you haven't been? But it's one of the most meditative places I've ever been, and dog sledding is very calm until the ice starts to break and you almost fall through, which has happened twice. But other than that, it is very, very calm. And you can see you dress with a great deal of warmth. I'm wearing seal and fox fur, and this is a shoulder season. So the ice is just breaking on this trip. In a true winter, we would be dressed in polar fur. You can't stay alive without polar bear. The modern stuff does not work. Here's an example. So as you look around, most would think, I mean, you all are a smart crowd, but most would think, oh, people would die really quickly out here, right? You better store a lot of food. You better figure it out. But they've mastered it. It's an abundance of food, and it's delicious. The whale and seal blubber, it tastes like ice cream. A lot of the food they eat cold. A lot is fermented. I've probably eaten some of the most exotic foods up in the Arctic. And I want to show you their clothing and how they do things. So this is polar bear skin. This is a little booty for a baby. And on the inside, there's fur. I don't know about all of you, but growing up, when I would see, really when I would read more than anything else about past times, I used to think people must be so cold, right? And once I started traveling, I saw that fur is put on the inside, whether it's the silk jackets in China or the Arctic or Mongolia. You put the fur on the inside, right? So my boots are fur lined on the inside as well as the outside, and so are these. Here are tendons, and these are used for all sorts of things. So these are used for fishing line. They're also used for anything that you need a very strong string for. Now, Fifi is my favorite dog sled dog. I don't know if you can tell. She's running backwards. Can you all tell that? I know. It was her day 3 for her. It was a tough day. We don't know if Fifi made it. They're pretty cut and dry with their dog sled dogs. They have to figure it out with no training. And if they don't, they're in trouble. Fifi on this day ended up back on the sled with us. In fact, the whole trip. She was hilarious. But I think this image is a really good example of what we have been doing, fighting against our purpose, our ability, and our innate vitality, right? Not even knowing it. She's clueless. The poor girl, she's not the smartest one on the block. She's real cute, though. But all she has to do is turn around. It's simple and cheap. So let's talk about the coastal Sami. Now I'm going to show the least photos of the Sami people because in some regions that I've been through, there's extreme persecution. And so I'm not going to show their faces. But I will show you some of their clothing, some of our trips, and things like that. And I may have thrown in one from a region where there's not a problem. We'll find out. But I want to show you, this is at 2 p.m., guys. This is how dark it is. The 24-hour night is really cool in that first photo. I absolutely love it. It looks like you're on the edge of the world. In shoulder seasons, you can see all the reindeer. So one of the 4 Sami were herders, and herders need a lot of space. And so with the borders that have come with countries and politics and all of that, they're losing the art of herding. But they have an incredibly beautiful culture, and a lot of their diet is around this group. Their diet is around the reindeer. This, showing you the back of him, these are the clothing. And they did unique things that I haven't seen in other places. Like, in addition to the fur boots, they put grass in the boots. They don't wear socks. And then they dry the grass or the moss every night over the fire, and then they put it back. It's absolutely fascinating how they adapt there. And you can see the clothing. Everything is very beautifully stitched. Beauty is a huge part of everywhere I go. You know, very often today I hear people say, oh, you know, why do people wear makeup? Why do people do all these things? But people always have. We like to make the world beautiful. And the kind of crunchy nature of like everything tan and just roll out of bed, that is not a thing throughout history. Definitely not where I go. So this is a group in Russia, another one that does a lot of reindeer meat and fat. They do most places I go to, I can't think of any exceptions, drink the blood during the slaughter. You have to drink it very quickly before it coagulates. They do the fermented whale skin as well, and reindeer brain and marrow. The Ainu, these are really interesting. Have any of you been in this region? Northern Japan? It's fascinating, totally unique culture. There's a few different places where they reside, but I got lucky enough to meet someone who was actually from there and became friends. They have different foods at different seasons, and you'll find this anywhere I go. It's based on what animals are available, right? And I want to really emphasize that I haven't seen a lack anywhere. There's always been abundance. There hasn't been fear of not having enough food. They're very relaxed. So bear seal is a type of seal, if you're curious. I know a lot of people don't know that animal. It's adorable. It can be the size of a bear. And it's gentle to us, but we are not gentle to it. It is tasty. And seal is very easy to catch. It's perhaps the easiest. It kind of pops up out of a hole in the ice, and you just get it. So it's so easy. It's like, it's almost funny. They also do the river fish as well, and shellfish and seaweed and occasional whale. They do the fermented fish roe. That's a pretty common one. Now, the ruminant pastoral, these are the ones that I think are talked about the most, and I am guilty of that as well. They're the easiest to visit, and they're some of the best documented. This is everything from the Kazakhs, some of the Sami, and Maasai, Samburu. Their signature, they have very strong taboos against eating birds and fish in general. So the Kazakhs, I love them. They're Mongolia, not originally from there, but they are migratory, so they're nomadic. And when I say nomadic, for those who aren't familiar, that typically means that the community moves 2 to 3 times a year to the same spots. It's very rare that you find a nomadic community that continuously moves. They do exist, especially in northern Mongolia. It's a different tribe. But in general, they're in these regions. Their diet is 95% carnivore. It can be higher, but I have not seen it less than that. It's deeply ketogenic. I had been in ketosis for about 15 years the first time that I went, and I got nauseous with how much fat it was. It was actually impressive, and I don't get nauseous. It's very seasonal. So in the summer, it's only dairy. Isn't that interesting? I think that's very interesting. They have a whole tent fully dedicated to dairy, and this is something that I'd love to bring to you all, and that is that the cultures that do dairy traditionally do not do it the way we do today, not even in our ancestral communities. They follow a lot of rules to keep the people safe, because dairy can be one of the best superfoods or the most deadly, and it flips very quickly to deadly. So you have to be careful. Or respectful. Here we had horse tartare, but we also have it as sausage as well, and a great deal of yak fat tea. These are the more modern gurs, but I wanted to show you something. Now, so far in this presentation, every house that I've shown you has been round. Has anyone noticed that? And has anyone noticed any plants growing around? Yeah, exactly. Yes. So here it's unique because it's one of the places where beds are raised. I find most beds down on the ground, but there are maybe 10 places I go where beds are raised. Now that makes sense in the cold. The women stitch these beautiful carpets and also wall coverings that keep it very warm. And then you have the fire in the middle, which is heated with dung. It is one of my favorite places to go. They're very early to rise, early to bed. The women milk and cook and hunt, actually. This is one of the places that women do hunt, but they don't hunt like we think. They hunt with their eagles. And the eagle hunting is done not for food, but for fur. That's the only time of year that they hunt. So they have wild horses. In fact, they don't keep anything enclosed. Their horses, their yaks, nothing. They're just wandering about. And then when you have to get on one of these wild horses, let me tell you, it is a challenge for me because they are not broken. So then you get on these horses and they will carry the eagle and ride and ride and ride until you get far enough away to where the eagle sees something. And then it will go after it, kill the animal, you'd go up and get it, and then you take it back, you skin it, you make it into clothing. So you'll notice in the pictures coming, everyone has fur on the inside of their hat, but it's actually everywhere. What I notice in all the carnivore tribes, regardless of type, is that they're incredibly hardy plus playful, which is an indication to me of flexibility, right? And endurance and adaptability. They sing daily, all of the tribes do, and they dance daily as well. They're very warm, they're very touchy-feely, with their families, with strangers, with everyone. And they typically have a lot of fun, right? Dr. Rimke talked about how we've really kind of lost the art of fun and getting together. Look at us sitting here, right? We're all facing one direction. Whew, you know? We're sitting on chairs. Nobody does that. We need to be on the floor with open hips, you know, moving about, rolling about with the children, playing. These tribes are all also very generous. They leave food in the gur, that's a yurt for others, for when they travel. So even if they don't think they'll ever be back, they leave enough food for whoever might come across their tent, their gur, to fully be fed for weeks. How generous, right? So like I've found in many of these tribes, they believe that vegetables make them sick. And I mean, it is a strong belief. It's like if you go to the Midwest and you're either for like Ohio State versus Michigan. It's so black and white, right? You get it. A lot of them also do a lot on organ soup. Yes.
Could you go back to the previous slide for 1 second?
Sure.
I've got a really selfish question.
Please, fire.
That girl there,
Yes.
inside, she's got perfectly straight teeth,
Yes, she does.
and there's no dentist there.
No health issues
Do you find that commonly?
across the board. Yeah, the wide bridge, the wide nose, the clear skin, the clear eyes, no moodiness in teenagers, no moodiness in toddlers, no crying, calm and ease to sleep. I see this across the board. I don't see illness in the communities that haven't been introduced to anything modern. Yeah, as soon as one or two things come in, still their teeth are good. Some other things can change. They can get like toenail fungus. It's minor things. So this is on one of my horseback rides with the Kazakh eagle hunters. And you can see when I came to this camp, it was 10 miles of off-road. There's no road that you follow. And then once you get there, then you go and travel through the mountains on horses that have never been tamed and on no paths. But you always find the way home. So we also have inland big game carnivores. And again, you're going to see some of the same names because each community and each village can be quite different from each other based on the topography. And that happens everywhere I go. Here they tend to do a lot of bear, reindeer, moose. It of course depends which region that you're in. But here it's in general the red meats, fish is supplemental, sometimes insects. The arid land are mostly gone, right? From the traditional scene. They were in the Australian outback. There may be some. I haven't seen any that haven't been modernized a bit. They do more of the insects in those communities, but we don't know how much that has changed from politics. So this one I left last. Definitely no dairy in this group, though. Okay, so let's go back to birth. Isn't that a cool picture of birth? Do you guys notice the posture? Really different. She looks pretty happy, doesn't she? When I'm in these communities, the birth is nothing. It's easy. They're not in pain. They're not in danger. It's quick. Now compare that to what we see, right? This is normal for us. Emergency, pain. Danger, danger, danger. But notice something else. The light that is shined, not just the posture change, but the light. Now, light affects the microbiome more than food. And this is the first way we're introducing even a healthy vaginal birth to the world. This changes everything right here. In our hospitals, we have superbugs. We all know about them, right? There's been some fascinating studies coming out year after year about the way that the UV lighting affects the microbes and how they change in the lighting. But it also affects us in the ATP and in the microbiome. The more you know, eh? So what about C-sections? I always get a lot of questions about these, and also a lot of, gosh, my child was born by C-section, it was an emergency, or we didn't know, because we didn't know. None of us knew these things. We didn't know about the microbiome. So some of the things I'm going to share today may seem a little doomsday, but I promise they're not. We're actually in a window of time where we may be able to fix it. I really feel that we can. For those who have been born C-section and those who haven't been born yet. I know a lot of people go towards the swipe. It's adorable. It's a cute effort. These guys are anaerobes. They die when they touch oxygen. So the most important ones are not going to make it. Further, if you think about it, we very often think of each birth individually and isolated. But if the mother was born C-section, or if the mother had IV antibiotics, or if she's having a C-section, it would be unlikely that she would not be on IV antibiotics during the birth, right? So she won't be able to give something that she doesn't have to the child. And I know everyone always wants to know about breastfeeding, but breastfeeding is wonderful. And it requires the vaginal planting of the microbes. Most of the breastfeeding is feeding the microbes that are planted during the vaginal birth. So if we miss that initial planting, what are we feeding?
Well, there's a kiss. There's a term for it, isn't it? Something kiss. Baby does on the way out to get the microbes in the vaginal passage.
I have no idea. Yeah. Someone Google. Someone Google. So there's been a good amount of research on the difference between formula-fed infants versus natural birth. This is a very basic slide. There's actually a massive, massive difference. But what we often see dominated in the C-section babes are more Clostridium. It's not great. And Enterobacter, very not great. And the less great E. coli, not the good ones. We have really good E. coli. And then there's shady, and then there's bad. So what about skin to skin? We have the microbiome of the entire skin, right? Don't we pass that on to our babes? Well, if you have them to pass on. But very often, babes born today are taken by the hospital staff who are constantly sterilized. And they need to be, right? They're working in an emergency room. They don't have the right microbes on the skin. Staph epidermis, which is very protective of staph A, which is such a huge problem in the hospitals. This is one of the areas that the dad really ferments the baby, by the way, is through touch, if he's healthy enough. Now, I know everybody wants to go to ferments and playing in soil, right? Everyone is always like, one of the first things people tell me is like, I eat kimchi, and I eat yogurt, and I ferment so much at home. Or you do high meat, right? Play in soil. These don't have the birth microbes. They're not found there. These are totally different microbes. They're good. They're good for other things, but they don't take the place, right? Playing in soil can be very helpful if you were naturally born. In fact, a lot of the soil microbes can wake up the birth microbes if they've been hibernating due to antibiotic use throughout your lifetime in a non-C-section person. But playing in soil for someone who never received their innate immune system and perhaps has mucosal eaters in their microbiome, and therefore not have their first defense of their immune system, That's a different story, right? So basically, I don't know if you guys saw the movie Nope, but nope, you cannot eat ferments and get there. Birth microbes are not replaceable. I am working on making them so, but right now they're not. So why am I telling you this? I know I usually have like very uplifting conversations. I'm so glad you asked. So glad. Today this happened. And also today, this happened. That was me and my mind going insane with the presentation, because as this happened, I was seeing someone cooking that I had never seen cook before. And my mind was blown, because each of these pathways, each of these amino acids, each of these ways of energy, there's microbes that are essential at every single one of these steps. And why we're needing more and more interventions is because we're losing our birth microbes. What if we don't have to? What if we can save them? What if our children and our grandchildren don't have to go through all the health issues that we've been through? How fabulous would that be, right? I think we all don't want anyone going through what we've been through. And yet the numbers are climbing every month. So I'm not the specialist here. You are, and I'm even a bit shy to ask you questions. But I will say, I exploded about leucine and isoleucine because I just finished a study where it was so deficient in the cells across the board. And there's very specific microbes at play. And when I looked at, I had actually already mapped out the mTOR microbes. That's why I opened up my computer during your talk. I wasn't trying to be rude. I was like, immediate crossover. The microbes that produce the isoleucine are the ones that work on the mTOR. So we're going to go through a couple of them today. But before we do, I want to talk about another route, right? Because there's always many ways to get healthy and many ways to get unhealthy. Leucines can be blocked by pathogens and pathogenic overgrowths. And I am seeing these more and more and more and more across the board in the medical diets, people not being able to get into remission. I'm seeing a lot of these. I'm seeing the Klebsiella, I'm seeing the Pseudomonas A in the stealth chronic form. And these are mucin eaters. When they eat your mucin, your immunity goes, your histamine goes through the roof, you become more reactive, you can't add in foods, right? So if you can't add in eggs or dairy, not that anyone has to, these can be at play. This, of course, leads to all the things that Dr. Abe was talking about today. Muscle loss, hypoglycemia, blood sugar issues, poor repair, terrible ATP. So let's look at one or two of the 200 birth microbes, shall we? We'll just do a couple. That's a panda giving birth and being surprised right away. Didn't know it was pregnant. Adorable. Breve M16. You know the microbe that I just bought and had shipped here? Yeah. Do you see why I was exploding? Okay, so mTOR involvement, this little microbe was very hard for me to find, and I'll tell you why. It's inexpensive. A lot of times these aren't expensive. They're just hard to find because, honestly, they're in labs or they're not on grocery store shelves, right? This little guy is M16V. You'll see at the end here. So a lot of people will go to the store, they'll get a probiotic, it'll say like bifidobacterium. If it doesn't have a number after it, personally, I would never put it in your body, because with all of these microbes, we have good and bad. And even if we take something pretty innocuous, like an L. plantarum, there's over 20 different of them, and we may be finding more. One, the 299V, is extremely antihistamine, wildly so. And then you have PS128 that builds dopamine and has been studied against Alzheimer's and a number of Parkinson's and nervous system disorders. They do wildly different things. They produce different foods for the host, and those foods are in the form of vitamins, minerals, amino acids. How much did we hear about amino acids today? That's right. That is right. So this little guy produces B1, thiamine. Now, does anybody know one of the main functions of thiamine? We've got like 20 shots because it does a lot. ATP. You can't have ATP without B1, right? You also demyelinate the nerves. How many nervous system disorders do we have today? Too many. Yes, way too many. From neuropathy to MS, you name it, we are nerve shot. And then B9, of course. So this is the one we're really going to break down. We're just going to break down this one. Bifidobacterium infantis, 35624. Now, anyone who works with me, I just go by the numbers. So I would call this 35624. So I put this on every single slide in case I use a different name each time and you're not confused. This one is so fabulous. Do you know what it does? It regulates the HPA axis. Who has trouble sleeping? Anyone? Yeah, bifido. It was supposed to come from your mom, so you can talk to her about that. This converts HMOs. So that HMOs are found in breast milk. So this would have needed to be seeded vaginally and then fed through breast milk. This one I see missing in almost all nervous system disorder folks that I work with. And chronic fatigue. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. If there's chronic fatigue, I very often see this one missing. Without this one, getting leucine into the cell is very difficult. Very difficult. Okay, so again, I'm just breaking down this one microbe so you can see how important these 200 birth microbes are. This synthesizes folate. How many folate deficiencies do we have around? B12. This one is really contributes to the environment. So if you don't have this one, it's very difficult to have B12 in the cell because the little microbes are little friends. They're like really good friends. They travel in packs. And so in the carnivore tribes, they may not eat the foods that keep many of these alive, but because they're born with the full birth microbiome, the little guys, they'll feed each other. So let's say in a beneficial microbial pack, we have 5 different microbes that are besties, right? And 1 or 2 die. The 3 or 4 can actually synthesize and make the food for the other one to keep it alive, so it doesn't die. Now, we're having people born that don't get any of them. So who's synthesizing food for them? Nobody, right? So that's why on carnivore diets in the tribes, they can eat 1 food, 3 foods, 5 foods, and have a perfect microbiome. They don't need to go and eat the different, GOS, FOS, XOS, different kinds of foods for these microbes. But we are starting to have to. It produces vitamin K and biotin. I see enormous biotin deficiencies within the cell. Now, we think of biotin as hair and nails, but really it's very nerve related. Minerals. Don't you guys always wonder why everyone needs so much darn magnesium? Right? Why everyone's so dehydrated? Now, there's multiple reasons for that. We overconsume water. We get waterlogged. We deregulate our vasopressin, right? Which causes chronic dehydration on the cellular level and too much water in the body to where we drink, but we're not getting hydrated. But look at zinc. Most practitioners I talk to will say that zinc deficiency is heavily across the board when tested. And without zinc, your mucosal lining, where all the good little microbes, our little friends, live, they don't have a home. And if they don't have a home, they go into the recesses. They go into hibernation like a bear. And then they need to be fed and coaxed out. But what very often happens when there's mucosal collapse is that other microbes come in, like that Pseudomonas A, that Klebsiella, that strep, which is the diagnosis of pandas. And when these come in, they eat your mucus. You can't starve them out. So they actually make you worse. And they drive histamines. And some of them, like Klebsiella, actually produces oxalates. They can do all sorts of things. Those aren't the good guys. Just a few important amino acids here, right? Tryptophan for sleep. Very important. Those mucus eaters I was telling you about, the first place they go to munch is actually the tryptophan, the precursors to melatonin. Melatonin is a strong antimicrobial against them, and so they are smart little cookies. They go eat that tryptophan, and then they have a party all night while you cannot sleep. And you just wonder, why am I not getting better? I'm doing everything right. Glutamine. A lot of diagnoses today are either excess or high. So we've got cancer, and I would say the general population, we have too much glutamine, right? Or we have to be cautious about glutamine, especially with things like cancer. But we also have conditions like dysautonomia, where it's typically extremely deficient. And the deficiency signs are often very similar, if not the same, to the excess. Arginine, totally not important, right? We did not learn how important that is today. Just, it does like nitric oxide, no big deal. So what about fatty acids? We've done vitamins, we've done minerals. Amino acids, how about fatty acids? I used to see so many people come in and say, I don't eat any restaurant food. I cook everything at home. I know exactly what fats I'm eating. And yet, when I do fatty acid tests, all my fatty acids are off. Why? Right? You've got to be able to absorb it into the cell. Always. Can you believe we're not done yet with this little microbe? Do we need an interlude? Okay, so this little best friend of ours, it aids in the production of serotonin by fermenting tryptophan. If you don't have this guy, your dopamine gets deeply disrupted. And it helps to produce GABA, which makes us a really nice social people who want to hug and snuggle. It gets rid of all the people yelling in traffic jams and the Karens and the angry teens. It gets rid of all of them. It does. It does. And what I see a lot of today, I don't know about you all, I see a lot of GABA receptor issues. So many. They're just burnouts. Endocrine hormones. How many people here have dealt with thyroid? I have. When I was sick, I had Hashimoto's, which would switch to very serious Graves'. This is one of the most common conditions I think we see in the public. You can almost throw a stone and hit someone with a thyroid issue. Without being infantis, multiple necessary hormones for the endocrine system get disrupted deeply. The insulin, now that you've learned more about mTOR, and so have I, you can see how that could affect as well the entire body. So cortisol, you get the dysregulated HPA. Now, cortisol is not a baddie. We love cortisol. It wakes us up. Without cortisol, we're not going to have our serotonin or dopamine. Our whole circadian rhythm gets upset. We love cortisol. We just don't like the pattern that we've been getting.
I'd stay alive without it.
Exactly. Yeah, we'd all be in bed. We'd be worse than the pandas. Yeah, exactly. We need our cortisol. Pituitary hormones. Oxytocin. If anyone here doesn't like to be touched, this is your lady. You need oxytocin. Oxytocin is the relaxer for females. Anyone born female? We need a lot of oxytocin to be lovely. We are our best selves with lots of oxytocin. We're our worst selves without it. Without oxytocin, conditions that we see very low oxytocin, autism, right? What has happened to our autism rates? and it correlates with our birthing patterns. Growth hormone, especially in infants and children. Less so in adults, but very much in infants and children. So let's also discuss what else it does. All of our good guys, and again, there's 200 of these, they fight pathogens. When we get a pathogen, most pathogens, there are exceptions, it can tell someone like myself exactly what was already missing in your microbiome for you to get sick with it, for it to be able to affect your body. Because when we have certain birth microbes in our microbiome, they actually kill those microbes when they come in contact with the body. So with all the film crew trips that I've taken all around the world for years and years and years, everybody gets E. coli. I didn't get it once, right? And it's what you plant beforehand. And I do tell them what to plant, but they do not listen. I cannot help it. I even bring it with. The C. diff, I'm sure you all have heard of that. People die of that in the hospital every day. That's where fecal transplants started to come in. E. coli, we're obviously talking about the pathogenic strains. There's many, and they act differently, right? You've got Shiga toxin that you cannot take an antibiotic for. It can give you HUS syndrome and vascular damage. And then you have some of the more run-of-the-mill EPEC. Salmonella and Staph A, MRSA. You go to any hospital, and these are some of the most deadly infections. But if you have B. infantis 35624, are they? Because it'll do a little war for you. So, where do we see deficiency? Autism spectrum disorders, ADHD, depression, anxiety. IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, including Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Colic in infants is this one. Due to the zinc, leaky gut. Metabolic disorders, not surprising given the presentation today, right? Everything from type 2 diabetes, type 3 diabetes, cancer, obesity. Immune-related conditions, right? Everybody has allergies these days. Babies are born with eczema. Autoimmune disease and dermatitis. Thyroid disorders, like we discussed, but also other hormonal disorders as well. When you don't have B. infantis, especially 35624, that mucin gets deregulated, and that mucin is actually a totally different part that helps to regulate your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, your hormones. So a lot of times, what I'm seeing now, as opposed to 10 years ago, when someone has a hormonal disorder, they may not be eating too many carbs, and therefore having estrogen dominance. And phase 2, phase 3 in the liver may not be having an issue clearing at all. You can see that on lab work. You don't have to guess. It's very often the mucin is very damaged. Cardiovascular. Right? And doesn't this sound familiar? Aren't the conditions that I just listed the most common conditions you hear about? If this one microbe can do that, can you imagine what the other 199 are doing? And we're killing them before we can find out, right? So remember Fifi. I think we can use this knowledge to collect a community, right? Dr. Rimka was talking about community. And community really affects the microbiome, and I'm going to talk about it in two ways. One is the internal microbiome that we briefly touched on tonight, right? How even one microbe being gone can drastically affect your resilience, your ability to break down a food, your ability to eat a food, your ability to get into remission, your ability to make vitamins, minerals, leucine. That baguette's for you. And but all we have to do is turn it around. These microbes are still here, and they want to work with us. They're our best friends. So we need to cultivate the community in our body to where they have a place to live, right? It used to be thought in microbiome science a long time ago that there is, beneficial pathogenic overgrowth. We now know there's so much more. And so if someone has been doing something for a year or two and not getting to where they need to go, we need to look deeper. How do we cultivate the right communities, the right environment for them to coax out of hibernation? And how do we save them and plant them for our children? So that's one aspect of community. The other aspect is exactly what Dr. Rimko was talking about last night. Our microbes are deeply affected by community, deeply. When we get light, that shifts our microbiome more than diet, like I mentioned. We need eye contact, we need touch. In none of the communities I go to do people sleep alone. None. They don't eat alone, they don't sleep alone, they don't live alone. How many of us live alone? And maybe you meet a friend for dinner once a week. Or you've been sick, and so you retreat like any animal does. But the more we have sick people in our community, the more we're actually moving in the opposite direction, right? Because we have to touch. And our microbiome and our body, so resilient, it has adaptability, and it will have adaptability in ways that we don't even know yet, right? But one of the ways that we give these microbes back to our family members and our friends is through hugging, kissing, touching, snuggling, being in the same room. We are all sharing microbes. You're welcome, by the way. Music affects the microbes deeply, especially the fungi. We have so many beneficial fungi in the body. So when we're dealing with the pathogenic fungi, same thing. We're lacking the beneficial. We're past the time of kill. We're to cultivate. Sharing food. Now, granted, you need a healthy enough mucosa, right? So nothing I'm saying is rigid. You have to cater this to yourself. But in healthy mucosa folks, sharing food is one of the ways that they keep replanting the microbes for each other, the saliva and all of that it interchanges, same with the hands. And there's shared gifts, blankets. You obviously don't bathe. Everything you wear is antimicrobial, like the silk or leather or fur, right? So you're not washing clothing. Yeah, let's talk about the dance. Yeah. So each of the communities I go to dances. And I don't know if any of you all came into Seville, but Seville, just hop, skip, and jump over that way, is home to the flamenco dancers, right, who stomp. And when we stomp, just like the Batwa lady over here, she's 7th generation that's alive, by the way, and over 120 years old. She stomps harder than anyone. She makes the whole ground shake. It moves your entire lymph. And I bring that up because our lymph from our head and neck and all the way down, but especially here, is where I see a lot of congestion in chronic illness. Things like the Pseudomonas, the strep, many of them can kind of harbor here. And it's natural. If you think of the position, the posture of someone who doesn't have energy, what is it? Imagine I'm on a couch. This shuts the lymph, right? And not moving shuts the lymph. And so how do we get the lymph moving? Well, in traditional societies and places I go, they dance. They're always dancing, right? And for the head, the neck, and the arm, because I see a lot of neuromuscular conditions, very often the lymph of the underarm is very swollen. Well, you have to use your arms for that, right? And the more sick you are, the more your arms come down. But what is dancing? Perfect posture, right? And your arms are up. And you're moving side to side, which activates parasympathetic activity, which gets you calm. And like Dr. Rimke said, no one heals in a state of stress. It's physically impossible. We can think of emotional stress, but very often these stressors are lack of touch, not eating at the same time, being out of coin with the circadian rhythm, and not having fun, right? The less energy we have, the more we do tasks that must be done. And then we guilt ourselves on how we don't get enough of those done. So we don't allow ourselves to have any fun. We lose our friendships, right? We make then everything about what we're doing, I think due to a lack of energy and due to no one's fault of their own. But we absolutely have to have community because we are social beings. And if you take us into isolation, our cytokines and our immunity, it's not a pretty picture. So dance. Dance. Now, if you have questions about genetics, the microbial genes outnumber the human genes in a body by a factor of 100 to 1,000 times. Now, I know this crowd isn't much into static diagnoses, but I am such a firm believer outside of the main conditions that you're born with, that you have one hell of a chance to shift that epigenetics by what you surround it with. And what is that? Your community, your internal, your external community. So, let's collect curiosities. The more certain we are, the more mistakes we make, the more unhealthy our communities become, and the less fun we have, right? Now, many of you may not know my story, but I got into this by accident. I had no interest in working in health at all, actually. It was my one subject I didn't like. And I fell into it when I got an infection in my brain and ended up disabled for 12 years. Now, going to all the experts in all the world only left me worse off. More bedridden, more close to death. It wasn't until we stopped going and we got curious, and we opened books, and we tried experiments, that we got better. And that was 5 years of attempts, and it was fun. It's so much more fun than going to the doctor's office. But I think whenever we feel certain about something, anything, and we should be each other's friends to help each other with this, whenever we're certain about something, see where we can break that certainty. Because the more curious we are, the more magical this world becomes, and the more possibility there is. Now, do you all know the story of Medusa? Yeah? She's a monster, right? Do you all know the true story of Medusa? So something you may not know about me is that I lived for many, many years in Greece. And I love archetypes. I love story. And I really love the archetypes. And so while I was there, and after I learned Greek, I really got into the old Greek myths, and I was blown away by how different they are in real life, like to the Greeks, and the ways that they had changed through the years. The true story of Medusa may sound familiar. She was a normal person, totally normal. It always starts with a monster, but she wasn't. She was a normal, devout follower of the religion at the time. And she cared, and she gave good intent in all her acts. And when she was in the most sacred of spaces, a god came down and raped her. And his wife punished Medusa, and so did the community, right? So who is Medusa actually? She's not a Gogol. She's not even a threshold guardian yet. She is a normal person who tells the truth, and no one listens. Isn't that everyone who's ever been sick? Isn't that anyone who's ever blown a whistle or stumbled upon a scientific breakthrough? The community doesn't like it, right? It's uncomfortable. It's very human. It's actually not godlike. It's very human to outcast the one that makes everyone uncomfortable, no matter whose fault it was, right? That goes into 35624, the microbe. It goes into oxytocin. So we talk about oxytocin as the love hormone, right? Women explode with it if they're healthy. And but it is also the hormone that breaks us apart. The tribes that I go to, one of the things that keeps them separate is that they don't have an oxytocin bond with separate tribes, right? So when you start eating something different, like you go to steak, salt, and water, and you start losing your friends, and it's traumatic and it's hard, that's an oxytocin break. You're actually having a full hormonal split, and they are having it with you, right? When you're sick and no one knows what it is yet and they don't believe you, you're having a full fracture from your tribe. Have you all ever studied what that does to societal animals like ourselves, communal animals? It's very common to kill the animal, right? So when we wonder why we have to do so much to even just be remotely healthy, this is partly why. Now, I did it. Thank you. Now, I want to tell you the rest of the story of Medusa. I wear her. And I wear her as a reminder. Because the true story of Medusa is that she gets made into a monster, that if she makes eye contact with anyone, she turns them to stone, but she actually doesn't want to. She doesn't want to at all. So she goes to the farthest reaches of the universe, which is a threshold, which is very symbolic in myth, right? So that no one can be hurt by her. And what happens? People stumble upon her island. And what does she do? She looks up to connect because she's a social being like all of you. She wants that oxytocin. She wants that connection. And every time she's let down when they're turned to stone. Now, who kills her? Anyone remember? Hercules? Perseus? It's Perseus. Yeah, it's Perseus. And how does he kill her? Yeah, but he doesn't do it directly. How does he do it? Shadows and mirrors. He uses a mirror. Very often, the person that makes society uncomfortable is killed indirectly because they lack courage to actually kill the victim, right? So I wear Medusa because everyone who comes into my office hasn't been believed. They're always telling the truth. It doesn't matter what they have. If I put 20 people in a room that all have the same diagnosis, that's super rare, they've never met anyone with it, they'll use the same adjectives to explain what it feels like. They're not lying. I imagine you all have felt the same when you tried to tell family members, doctors, anyone, what it's actually like. And eventually, or quickly, depending on how smart you are, you stop sharing, right? You just tell the tip of the iceberg. Because every time you share, it breaks that oxytocin further, that bond. So I wear the Medusa to always look people in the eye and to always believe them. She's the ultimate symbol of curiosity. We can get at any of these conditions if we're curious long enough. And if we genuinely care for each other in community. So I am never gonna give you up. Thank you.
Music for the people.